So in this session, we are going to be talking about flexible metadata, now, next, and after that. And the now is self-evident. Next is on the very near-term horizon. And so what we want to leave the most time to talk about is after that. And so ideally, I would like to take half of this time and leave, half to two-thirds of the time to go through the presentation. And we would really like to solicit feedback, thoughts, opinions, questions from you all who have either seen flexible metadata, demonstrated, have worked with it, or just have questions or ideas about where we'd go next. So if at the end of this we have 5 to 8 minutes where we can have discussion, that would be fantastic. So starting with the now, I'm going to hand this over to Rob to give us a quick overview of where flexible metadata stands in Hyku and Hyrax at the moment.
So right this moment, we can see that in Haiku release 7.0 and 7.1, there is an updated version of the flexible metadata that relies on the same version that will be in the next Hyrax release. And that there's currently the ability to upload YAML-based M3 profiles, use those profiles. All of the dynamic form rendering happens. It changes what you see when you edit, it changes what you see in the show view. It does give you some OAI PMH from the simple DC mappings, and the indexing is driven by the profile. So, like all of the different things, you used to have to change to add a new property to a active Fedora, like let's say Hyrax 4.0 work type, you had to change 17 files. And so now you can just add that property to your metadata profile and then use the new property. Also, it means that we have versioned metadata. So if a work is created on, let's say, version 2 of your profile, and then you want to update it to the newest version, maybe that's version 3, maybe it's been a while since you've seen this work, and now you're on version 6, it'll stay functional with the old profile until it is edited, and then it gets updated to the new profile. So some things that we're still kind of maturing and working on actively are controlled vocabulary support. That's making significant progress over the last 3 or 4 months or so. Profile validation. This is one of those things where the more upfront validation we can do on your profile, the better off, and the fewer like semantic errors and stuff that you can introduce are. Probably the biggest piece of this now are figuring out which things should be warnings and which things should be errors when you take a metadata field out that's required for a feature, right? Like you can't sort by creation date if you remove creation date from your profile. But you should be able to do that, and we should warn you that the sorting by creation date isn't going to work if you do that. So like finding the balance between those things and figuring out which features we need in Hyrax to now be more conditional, basically. And then there's no structure at all for creating new work types. That's still a programmer activity. And then the last one is in Allenson Flex, which is the now old version of flexible metadata. We had a cool proto React based UI for editing profiles, and that has not been brought forward yet at this point. So in Hyrax, the core infrastructure is merged. There is an issue with DASI testing, and once that's resolved, then the rest of the Hyrax release can come up. Nick Herminda talked about there being an imminent release and talked about all of the stuff that's really exciting that we want to get out. This is what's stopping that release from coming out, and I am really sorry that I have not gotten to it yet, but I really want to get that resolved so that we can get a release out. It worked great in Copy, doesn't work in DASI. We're not sure why, but hopefully we'll have that resolved soon. Newton, did you want to talk about this piece?
Sure, and this is reiterating a little bit of what you said about the state of it in Haiku currently. Um, but so flexible metadata is just an absolute sea change in terms of repository administration and bringing authority and decision making to the repository administrator to do customizations, which also brings, of course, a lot of danger with it. But so what we can do with the current version of flexible metadata is you can make all sorts of changes to the metadata profiles of works in your tenant. And then with context, you can get more granular and have admin sets and have different metadata setups per admin set. So, ostensibly you would have one that is maybe direct deposit that only a few depositors have access to, probably your metadata librarians have access to, and then self-submission goes through a mediated deposit, and you can set different requirements, different fields. You can have a bit more flexibility and freedom with one and nail down some of the items on another one. So it really is just a game changer, and in both in terms of repository administration, but also in terms of how we think about where control for implementing future features goes, right? Because the M3 schema becomes an area where we can allow decision making to be made at that level. And so we can build it into that going forward and give repository administrators that much more control. But there are still areas where the implementation of flexible metadata is a bit rough, and that's going to inform a little bit of what's next, but especially what's coming after that. So what's coming up very near term, we have a few things that are already kind of in the pipeline, ready to complete and strengthen the current iteration of flexible metadata. So first, get flexible fully across the line in Hyrax with a version release. We've talked about that. The next, and this flows from the presentation that Nick S. and Notch H just did, guided import brings in an important improvement to the dynamic templating that I mentioned earlier. In the current release of Hyku, you can create a dynamic template. It is based off of your default admin set. With flexible metadata, you can make multiple admin sets that each have different metadata profiles. And so there's a need to allow repository administrators to see what each of those look like. And so this is the dynamic import template that was built out of the community effort that Nick was talking about. And so you can see there now at the bottom, when you want to download a CSV template for your tenant, you first select the admin set. And then also the admin set that you select both dictates what you see in that CSV import template, but also what the import is verified against. So you get context-aware validation for your works. So this is coming in a 7.2 release, which will be forthcoming, I'm expecting, within the next month or so. We'll see what all gets wrapped up with it. The majority of this bulk work is done. And so then we want to talk about what's after that. And so we have three directions that are under exploration currently. The kind of relationship that Rob and I have is I kind of dream things into, well, not existence, but into hypothesis. And then Rob tells me why they will or will not work. But the three areas that we've discussed looking at, these are, as I say here, potential ideas, not roadmap commitments, and we want to start a conversation about these. So the first is many of the properties in flexible metadata, because you're editing directly in the YAML file, flexible metadata touches so many different systems, right? It touches the Solr indexing, it touches the configuration, it touches controlled vocabularies wherever those live, it touches indexing, and some of those, well, they behave differently, right? So some of them have enforcement pathways, and so what you put in the M3 profile goes. Some of them will conflict with other systems. Some of them are really just stating a preference or a documentation, but don't actually have an enforcement pathway. And so it's unclear what those declarations in the M3 profile do. For your basic changes, we kind of know what to do, but that leaves a lot underdocumented and unexplored. So we are looking at refining both the setup of those properties, how they're structured in the YAML file themselves, and then also creating more documentation to expose what those keys do, what they don't have declarative power over, where gaps are. And so this is one of the first areas that we're looking at getting better understanding and maybe a bit better refinement on what we're doing. Secondly, bringing controlled vocabularies up to first class, and so this involves both the relationship between the M3 profile and those controlled vocabularies, and some development work external to the M3 profile where repository administrators could add to or modify controlled vocabularies without developer intervention. I think the direction would be initially to allow for the editing and importation of local controlled vocabularies, and then in an additional phase to connect us to external sources like Library of Congress, Getty, etc. And then finally, this one I'm really excited about, and I don't know if I'm more excited than the practicality warrants, but bringing in, feel like this is not super well named for what it is. I envision bringing in the YAML editor. So currently you download a YAML file, you load it up in whatever program you use to edit those sorts of documents. And then you save that file and then upload it back into the system. I think halfway between that and a full-blown user interface, which comes with some benefits of user friendliness, but also some limitations or difficulty with how do you get it to touch everything that you can do directly in the YAML editor. I think halfway between those two is having an editor directly in the Hyku interface that it ensures that people are editing on a clean platform, right? You're not just trying to open Notepad++ and do your best and you accidentally add an extra space and have to deal with the consequences of that. So it can have those kind of internal validations, make sure that everybody has access to the best editing platform, or at least a sufficient editing platform for doing these YAML edits, but also that you can have live validation against other components of the system. And so it can give you drop-down autocomplete or show where conflicts potentially exist before you save your file, upload it, and then maybe get an error message if it's truly invalid, or maybe don't get an error message because what you do is technically permissible, but it does run into a conflict against some other setting that you have in your app. So those are three directions that we're looking at. Oh, here we go. I've been, I think, moving the wrong way. But at this point, we have a few minutes left, and I would love to hear from you, either comments in the chat or feel free to unmute and make comments about what direction you would like to see us explore for making future improvements or enhancements to flexible metadata.